come to tempt me, devil.
Man gives in to temptation freely enough without any help from me. Thank you very much.
Tempt me, devil, and you'll fail.
Fine. Just please sit down. Relax. Don't get tense. I've no intention of leading you from the path of righteousness or whatever. Can you believe that? An entire city up in smoke? What a temper.
One of my favorite pieces of music, sung by Don Henley of the Eagles fame. He released an album in 1995 called Actual Miles, which was a compilation album, but it included some new work as well. One of those pieces was a song called The Garden of Allah. Now, don't get all huffy and don't get all me about it. It is not a song about the PLRI, the peace-loving religion of Islam. It has nothing to do with Islam. It's not about that at all. In fact, it's an allegorical tale based on a historical hotel in Los Angeles back in the 1920s and 30s called the Garden of Allah. And that hotel was a refuge, I guess, for movie stars in Hollywood, where they could go and have their debauchery in private and nobody would tell on them or anything else. And so it was also known as Gomorrah by the Sea. It was a place of, well, let's just call it sin and debauchery. And metaphorically, it was symbolic of the dirty sinfulness, if you will, of Hollywood. In this piece of music, though, Henley is playing the role of a narrator who is contemplating the evilness of mankind and how mankind seemingly has discovered all of this ability to be destructive and evil and really what's changed. He's kind of wondering, and into the conversation steps the devil. Scratch himself hops in and starts chatting with him about, I remember the good old days when I would hang around here with Huxley and other guys and we would talk, when evil was fun. He says, kind of somewhat sarcastically, I guess. But the curious thing about this conversation is that it's the devil, Satan, Hasatan, whatever you want to call him, realizing in the middle of the discussion that he has become obsolete. He recites to the narrator the things that I used to do. And he sings to him or says to him this line that has stuck with me through all the years. Because there are no facts. There is no truth, just data to be manipulated. I can get you any result you like. What's it worth to you? Because there is no wrong. There is no right. And I sleep very well at night. That's just a short little snippet of what he says. It's intriguing because Satan discovers that he is essentially obsolete. Mankind has mastered evil and no longer needs the concept of an evil deity to rationalize his misbehavior. It's a fascinating piece of music. It's one that I really like. It's got a really good drive beat to it that I love. It's got unique sounds, and if you know me, you know I'm a musician, and this is kind of things that intrigue me, musically speaking. But it was that line, there are no facts, there is no truth, just data to be manipulated. And he wrote this song in 1995, so he recorded it, released it in 1995, which means he probably wrote it in 93, 94, long before the internet culture, long before any of that kind of stuff really became commonplace. But this idea has stuck with me through all these years. And as I was doing the show prep yesterday, getting ready for this, it was almost as if that popped right back into my head again, because what is truth? What is data? What does all this mean? Or is it just data being manipulated? And of course, all of this came from a conversation about the numbers with regards to COVID and the cases and the case loads that COVID is experiencing. And we're starting to see we're starting to see a lot of questioning. But of course, you can't question things. If I start running in my podcast here titles like COVID numbers are wrong, and you know as well as I do that it'll be labeled as fact-checked, as inaccurate, and that kind of thing. You can't even question it. I can't even legitimately ask a question about COVID numbers without somebody saying, why do you want people to die? Why do you hate people, David? Can't you just wear the damn mask because you care about everybody else? Which isn't what I'm asking about or saying anyway. We're told that people are dying of COVID, but the numbers, do they support that? Johns Hopkins last week had a report up on their website that seemed to dispute that. It seemed to call into question the numbers. To me, that's fine. That's okay. This is the scientific method. We ask questions. We replicate data to confirm hypotheses and conclusions. What we don't do is hide information that might seem contrary to our beliefs and our presupposed conclusions. That's called confirmation bias. Well, lo and behold, Johns Hopkins University, you can't find that article now. It's gone. Nothing that says, here's an article that we disagree with its conclusions. Nothing that says at the top, we think that this data is inaccurate. Nothing that says, we think the interpretation of this data is inaccurate. Here's why we think. None of that. It's just gone, which of course is stupid in the age of the internet, because everything you've ever put on the internet, somebody has. I know it sounds weird, but remember that picture you took of yourself at that party where you were a little tipsy and you did, it's out there, folks. Even if you deleted it, it's out there. And the same is true of this article. It's easily recoverable if you know what you're doing, if you know the right places to go to it. It's still there if you know what to look for, which means that now you have the added element of, there was this article that seemed to indicate that our conclusions might be wrong. And instead of challenging it, instead of saying, okay, well, what about this? Or what about that? Instead of that, we got gone. And defeating the whole purpose of science, of course. Is that how science is done? No, it's not. There is a great deal of question about that. What's going on here? In my own local county here, Kitsap County, Washington, the weekend before Thanksgiving, the county changed its metric system. Now, to their credit, they at least told us they were doing it. They didn't just do it and go, well, we don't know what you're talking about. They did tell us that they were changing it. But the change was rather intriguing. Before that, we had number of cases, number of deaths, number of active cases. Now, to me, that's the way it's done. This was creating a problem because we had like 57 active cases in the early part of November out of a population of 275,000 people. Very many, folks. In fact, I started playing with numbers, went to the county's own website, looked up their numbers, and while according to the percentages, you have a better chance of getting COVID than you do of getting any type of cancer here in Kitsap County, you have a 90% chance, 90% better chance of dying of cancer here than you do of COVID. Again, that's just me looking at numbers. It's just simple mathematics, not that complicated. But at the same time, it doesn't fit the agenda. And so the county shifted its metrics from total number of cases, total number of deaths, total number of active cases, to total number of people in isolation, total number of people in tracing or suspected contact, and total number of deaths. We also used to report negative tests. We don't do that anymore. And so suddenly we went from about 400, people involved in this whole thing out of our county population to just right around 1,000, like that. All of a sudden, it looks like Kitsap County going spiking, which is not what happened. Literally nothing changed. Literally Everything is exactly the same as it was. But it looks different now, doesn't it? So what's the truth? What's the reality here? What's the facts? Or is it just data to be manipulated? Nothing's actually changed. It's just how we're reporting it. And we've changed how we're reporting it to number of people in isolation, which means, all right, let's say for the sake of argument that you're a friend of mine and you come home from work one day and your wife is really sick with some sort of respiratory illness. Well, in the age of COVID, what do? You go get a COVID test. You get one too because you've been exposed to her and kind of like to know. Well, for the next 3 days, however long it takes to get the results of that test, which in this case turned out to be about 3 days, you're on that list of people in isolation. Do you have COVID? We don't actually know. But you're in isolation, and all the people around you are now in that contact thing. So one person might have COVID, and we have at least 4 people that are now in tracing because, well, they could have been in contact. We still don't even know. 3 days later, of course, we find out that you're negative for COVID, which doesn't necessarily mean anything these days from what I hear, but officially you're negative for COVID. Do we pull all the people out of tracing, out of isolation, or not? We don't know. The statistics don't show us that anymore. The rate of infections is supposedly going up and up and up. And there's this difference between static positions and rates. I got in this conversation the other day, believe it or not, about dinosaurs. My paleontologist friend had posted a note about growth rates for Tyrannosaurus rexes and how this article was misinterpreting the data. And I think he's right, because it's missing the point that mass change over a given period of time, let's just say a year, if an adult T-Rex gains 1,000 kilos over a year, it's not the same as a juvenile T-Rex gaining 30 kilos over the same time period, because there is a rate difference that, 1,000 pounds out of 10,000 kilos isn't as much as 30 kilos out of 3. I mean, there's a difference in rate. Same with a submarine, how you get a submarine going up and down. You have 2 gauges, a rate of change gauge and a actual velocity of change. And you have to learn how to read the two together so that you don't overshoot your depth as you're trying to change. It's something that you do instinctively when you're driving, but you never think about as you make a turn, the rate of your turn versus the velocity of your turn. They work together. Well, in this COVID thing, it's like we're ignoring one or the other. We're seeing the rate of change, we're focused on that. Or if you're the media, you're focusing on the massive change. Oh, we've got 156,000 cases now in Washington. Right, but how many of them are active? And over the course of the year, what does that mean? Is it how many? If the percentages hold, we don't have enough people sick right now then to really justify shutting down the state. But you can't even ask that question, because as soon as you do, the news will come on with some human interest story, not resource story, but human interest story about how this person or that person or you have been directly affected by COVID. And if only people understood how dangerous this really is, you'd wear your mask all the time, even while you're sleeping. Because, here in Washington, I don't know about where you are, but here in Washington, we're shut down because your house is the most dangerous place there is. So we don't want people going out because your house is the most... I'm not making this up, folks. This is what the governor said. I've got him on tape saying it. At what point can we start asking legitimate questions about how this is going to work, about how this actually functions, what's going on, without being ridiculed about wanting to ask those questions or being accused of being insensitive and argumentative? I get it. COVID's a real disease. I get it. People have died from it. I understand that. Does that mean we shouldn't ask any questions at all? Does it mean we should just accept it as as the de facto point of wherever we are as a society? And if I don't think that it is, for whatever logical reasons in my mind I've come up with, instead of challenging that logic, we simply point a finger at me and say, you hate people. You don't care. You want people to die. No, my dear, what I really want is a few answers to my questions that make sense.